Hello, beautiful souls. Today's episode is so good. And before we jump in, I have some exciting news to share. If you've ever wondered where you're blocking money, this is for you. I've created a free quiz to diagnose your money wounds so you can heal them and unblock yourself to receive more money. Just go to moneywoundsquiz.com and answer 6 quick questions to get your insanely accurate and potent results. And if you're loving my vibe and want to work one-on-one to call in more feminine energy wealth, I would love to hear from you. You can shoot me a DM on social media or go to emilywilcox.com to learn more. Hello and welcome back to the M Makes Money show. I am so happy to be joined here by Carly, who is the CEO and head coach at the Midas Academy, an academy where entrepreneurs build their wealth through growing their impact and fulfillment. She's got a master's in psychology, over a decade of experience in that field, but then transitioned to coaching in 2017 just to have more agency over her impact, her lifestyle, and her wealth. So her flagship offer is the Midas Coach, which is a certification designed to educate and train coaches on a higher standard so that they can make a bigger, psychologically safe transformation for their clients. She lives in New Zealand with her husband and chocolate Labrador, and travels the world for new adventures whenever she can. She just told me she's going to be coming to California soon, which is where I'm at. So Carly, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Emily. So happy to be here.
Yeah.
So good.
So I have a few friends who started out in psychology and then kind of shifted into coaching. And I know sometimes there's like an interesting identity shift that happens because like the traditional like therapy community kind of holds their nose at coaches.
100%.
What was that like for you to sort of claim the title of coach?
Oh my God, it was such an identity shift. Thank you for bringing that up. Do you know what? It happened so long ago now. I actually sometimes forget about it, but man, it was so interesting. So I was still like in my job as a therapist when I decided to become a coach. And me deciding to become a coach was kind of like relatively a snap decision for me. It had kind of been floating around in my head for a little bit, but it was just something that came to me one day, and then I had to figure out how I was going to tell my workplace, you know, all of my peers that I had spent, you know, years and years alongside, like we'd build these careers beside each other. And I remember telling them that I was going to become a coach. And actually, most people didn't even know what it was because this was a few years ago and the coaching industry isn't what it is now. But, you know, my bosses, they were kind of like, why? Like, why would you want to be in an industry that's like not regulated and, you know, people don't have to be trained to be in? And like, why don't you just want to be a psychologist? And it was met with a lot of like, just, I don't understand it, which is fair enough, given that people just didn't really get what it was at that point in time. But it was a huge identity shift for me to, I think, not drop, because a lot of what I do is still very informed by that whole part of my career, but really make that transition from, I thought that I was going to be a clinical psychologist for 10 years and really like spending a lot of time and energy and money working towards a master's, and then all of a sudden being like, actually, that's not what I want. But I think because I was moving to something that I was so excited about, and the promise of freedom and the opportunity to impact in ways that weren't going to be regulated, and that, you know, I wasn't going to be really tied to one modality, or that was really, really exciting for me. So as much as of a challenge that it was, yes, I was way more excited and happy to take on that challenge because of what it offered me.
Yes. And I'm also curious because in psychology, you're really trained to be more neutral and not share like any of your own personal stories or opinions, right? Like that's just not part of the therapeutic relationship. Did that feel difficult when you transitioned into coaching, or was that another sort of freedom of expression that you were looking forward to?
Well, I actually probably had it a little bit different than everyone else. So I worked a lot with kids. So there was actually, and with older, like, early teens and things like that, to build that relationship, you actually had to give a bit of yourself.
Okay.
So that was already kind of part of, my modus operandi anyway. And like working with the parents and stuff, they wanted to know things about you. They wanted to know like who this person was who was working with their child and things like that. So I had it differently than everyone else, but yeah, absolutely. It's kind of like that's what you are trained to do, is really be quite impassive and, not share a lot of what your details are about your life. But, I do love that about coaching, that people come in, and especially with social media and the way that we market, like people can come into your, into your world and they know so much about you.
Yeah.
And almost nothing about them. So the dynamic is almost shifted. Sometimes when people come into your world, I don't know if you experience that too. It's like they know all of the stuff about your life and you're like, okay, so let me get to know you now.
Right. Yeah. Totally. Like let's start from the top. Like, are you married? Do you have kids? Like, where do you live?
And they're like, so this other day when you got ice cream at this place, where was that?
Right. Yes, absolutely. That's hilarious. Okay. So I imagine you were probably making like a pretty good salary as a psychologist. What did that look like?
I mean, that was pretty average, to be honest. So when I finished my bachelor's degree, so the way that it works in Australia and New Zealand is that you finish your bachelor's degree, and then if you want to be a practicing psychologist, you have to go on and go through a number of years of your master's training. You have to go through a year of registration process, and that's quite a lot to get into, especially when you don't know what kind of psychologist you want to be. And if you want to do that, there's a big decisions to make at 21,
Yeah.
So I went and worked in the field first, and I kind of did it opposite to the way that everyone else did it. So I started working as a behavior therapist first and worked my way up in that job and spent 7 years in that job, worked up to being a consultant. So that was where I was working a lot with the parents and teachers and things like that. And yes, my salary did get better in that time, but by the time I left, I was still only making probably, it would have been about like 50K US a year.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So it's not huge. It's definitely livable, but it's not massive. And that's pretty standard for a psychologist. You're probably not going to earn above 100K as a psych.
Interesting. See, our psychologists here make six figures.
Yeah. And that's 6 figures, American as well. So it's like so different to what we get here. But yeah, it's unusual to make that much. You'd have to be a professor or like, work up really, really high in the medical system or something like that.
Yeah.
Meaning you have to play by all of the rules.
Right.
not my vibe.
Yeah. I mean, we could go down a whole crazy tangent because as I told you, I lived in Sydney for a year, and obviously Australia and New Zealand, different countries, but it was so fascinating for me. I was in pharmaceutical sales at the time and working in psychiatry. And just to see the differences in the medical system, it completely blew my mind. But also like doctors in Australia, like they weren't making the kind of money that doctors here were, but also like the stress level was completely different.
So different.
And like the burden on the patient to be financially responsible is completely different. And so that's not the purpose of this podcast, but it's just, it was so fascinating for me. So I do forget that sometimes that you're like, 50K for a psychologist. I'm like, oh, right. Cause like just the medical system is so different.
So different. Like most of that is covered. You have an accident here in New Zealand and every penny is covered by the government.
Yeah. Meanwhile, like I'm meeting with a new therapist this afternoon and it's like, she's out of network for my insurance. It's a sliding scale between $250 to $500 an hour. I have to pay her cash up front, and then she'll give me a super bill that I can submit to my insurance, and we'll see how much the insurance covers. It's, it's a totally different world. But but if you want somebody good, that's what they all do. Like you just have to pay cash and then hopefully maybe get some of it reimbursed later. So
isn't it funny though, our responses about paying a therapist that much when we happily pay coaches way more than that?
Oh, totally. And I had to like shift that in my head because I think we do have an entitlement towards like what we believe are, medical services. And so I was like, oh, like, okay, if I'm going to see her once a week, we're talking about if I'm at the bottom of the scale, which like, I don't personally, like from an identity perspective, want to be at the bottom of her scale.
Yeah.
That's $1,000 a month cash, like, which just feels so wild. But then when I was like, okay, what do I want to pay her? I was like, I want to pay her 333. Like that feels really good. And I was like, I would so happily pay 333 to like a spiritual medium or for like a one-off coaching session. And so that actually really helped to like recontextualize it in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. It is funny though, because I get asked that all the time. Like, how did you make that switch from like charging or being paid so little as a psychologist or in field of psychology and then moving into coaching where it's just like thousands and thousands of dollars per hour essentially is what people charge. Yeah. It's very different world.
Yeah. Well, and I see often like in my clients and, you know, I walked through this myself where like all of my worthiness stuff, all of my unhealthy beliefs around money came up when it came to essentially me being the service, right? Because like I had sold physical products before and there was like no issue with that. But when it's like you're basically just buying my time, access to me.
Yeah. It
was like everything came up like, who am I to charge this? What does it look like, you know, over delivering, la, 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 the list goes on. So what did that feel like for you?
Oh my God. The whole like charging per hour thing. Because I think when you start out as a coach, that's really normal is to charge per hour or, you know, to charge for a couple of sessions a month and kind of bundle it together. And because I knew what my company were charging me out at. My company were charging me out at, I think it was like $130, $140 an hour. And I was getting paid about 30 or 40 of that. I can't remember exactly per hour. And so for me to, as a coach, you know, the coaching school that I went to was like, you know, start at $150 an hour. So that's a big discrepancy. Like that is huge to get your head around. And I grappled with that for months, so much so that I actually avoided having clients. I kind of just like dabbled in it while I was still working. I avoided having clients for the first few months because I was like, I just can't ask for that money from somebody to coach them when I am being paid, you know, basically, you know, a quarter of that in my job where I'm doing something so similar. So that was something that took me quite a long time to get my head around. But once I got a taste of it, then I was like, oh no, I can do this. But it was just getting over that first hump of like, yeah, okay, I am going to charge, you know, that amount for my time and energy. And then of course, once we start charging, you know, by value and transformation and what we bring to the client and what we offer to them, then it becomes so much easier. But, you know, making that shift is really hard because we've been taught all of our lives, you know, that time is money and time is the value. And the more time that you spend on something, the more you're going to pay for something. But actually, no one's really stopped to think about that. And it should be completely the other way around. Like if you, you know, create something in half the time, then shouldn't that be more valuable than creating it in double the time? It's really weird. So yeah, that was a real
like
challenge.
If I went to a contractor and said, you know, build me a house, and I was getting quotes, and one was like, I can build you the exact house you want in 2 months, and one was like, it's going to take 2 years. Like, which one should cost more?
Right?
Like, I'd want to pay more to have my house done much faster.
It's funny, isn't it? How we can like have one rule for one industry and then a totally different one for another one. So yeah, and I think, you know, psychology and coaching do get compared a lot, but they are very, very different. You know, psychology is built off, I should say, like traditional psychology is built off the medical model of helping someone who feels like they are below baseline get back to baseline. Coaching typically helps someone who's already functioning at baseline or above to move even higher. So it's not solving something that is broken or fixed or, you know, feel like we need help from the medical system to work with. It's really different. So it was a shift and it has been a huge shift, but you know, it's part of it really. And I see every entrepreneur go through that. Like, yeah, absolutely.
So talk to me about the Midas Academy and
Mm-hmm.
like how you got the idea and how you named it.
Okay, so the Midas Academy. So the Midas Academy is the name of my business now, but it started out. Do you know the story of King Midas?
No.
No, you don't know. Okay. So about 50-50. People know it, people don't. So King Midas, this is a Greek legend. So, Greek, all old Greek legends and stuff. This is always the one that like has stuck with me since I was a kid. So King Midas was a very, very greedy king who loved gold. He was just said to be obsessed with gold. Like he just wanted all of it. And one day, for whatever reason or another, he was gifted a wish from one of the gods, and he wished for everything that he touched be turned to gold. So you might have heard people talk about like the Midas touch.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
like when you touch anything that you touch turns to gold. And so he had this power bestowed upon him. And so he gleefully like went around the palace garden and touched everything. And, everything's turning into gold, thinking, oh my God, I'm so rich. Look at my life. This is wonderful. Then he goes to, eat some food, and he picks up a grape, and then he realizes that the grape has turned to gold and he cannot eat it. His daughter walks into the room and he goes to hug her, and she turns to gold, and he realizes that actually this desire, this obsession with gold has essentially taken away so many of the things that are so important to him and being able to live like this rich life. And so the story goes on, but essentially I took the name Midas into the academy because as entrepreneurs, as business owners, of course, it's so important to do the work to make your business profitable and to be building that wealth. That's so incredibly important. But when we chase money mindlessly, when we do it at the expense of our values and the things that are the most important to us, we miss out on the point of having that money. And then this is what I see a lot of in our industry is like this mindless money chasing, and of course across other industries as well, but it doesn't end up with a fulfilled life. It doesn't end up with a fulfilled entrepreneur, and that therefore costs them, but it also costs their clients and the impact, the mission that they're on too. And so we take the name almost as a bit of a reminder, a bit of a warning, like, yes, we're going to focus on building your wealth. Yes, we are. But we're also going to focus on the other things like your fulfillment and your impact as well, because as entrepreneurs, that's what we're here to do. We're here to change something about the world that we see is missing. And without that, what are we here for? So, I mean, I had known the name Midas and the story of King Midas for a long time. So it was late December 2019. Yeah, it was like December 2019, and I had this idea for a new mastermind that I wanted to run, and I thought I'll call it the Midas Academy. But the name, I was just journaling, the name just came to me. I cannot even tell you where it came from. And then I was like, Midas, that's really cool, King Midas. And then obviously like remembered the story. So it was completely like one of those intuitive moments where I can't even tell you where the name came from. It just popped into my head. And so I ran it as a mastermind it was a 6-month mastermind. I ran it twice in 2020. And then I was like, actually, it was my business manager. She said to me, she's like, what if we make this the entire concept and like the entire name of the business? And then within that, you have different programs that solve different particular things. And so it's kind of been a bit of I guess it's changed over time, but yeah, that's where it comes from.
Oh, I love that so much. And to me, it's really like the embodiment of feminine energy wealth, which is like, it's not just the end justifies the means. It's like the means are so important. And when you get the means right, you will naturally get the end.
Exactly.
Like when you are loving life and you are on mission and you are doing what you're meant to be doing, like, of course, more money is meant to flow to you.
100%. Like, I was talking with one of my team members the other day, and she was talking about she was asking me about like my take on fulfillment, because fulfillment is a word that I use a lot in my brand. And, a lot of people are waiting to get the money before they feel fulfilled. But no, it's completely the opposite way around. It's like focus on your fulfillment first, and then everything else is going to flow from there. It just has to. Like I've seen it time and time again. Like it can't not. It's almost like a rule. It's like gravity.
Yeah. Yeah. So you started coaching in 2017. So here we are 5 years later. What does money look like in your business now?
So in terms of like just like how much of it there is, obviously that is the biggest difference. One
So
of
how
the
much
things
is
that I
there?
have, yeah. So I mean, I was thinking about this before I got on the call because I remembered you were going to ask me this. So for the last like 9 months, we have been between about $70 to about $115,000 a month. So we're kind of hovering around that six-figure mark pretty consistently, which is kind of incredible and mind-blowing to me. But at the same time, it's gotten to the point where it just feels normal now, which is really, really cool. But it's also the relationship with that has really shifted a lot as well. You know, I did a lot of like, I've invested quite heavily in a lot of like money mindset work quite early on in my business. I could see that was something that was going to really trip me up if I didn't work on it. And so I did invest a lot of time and energy and money into looking at that. And it's always something that I work on a lot with clients. But interestingly, what I've noticed, and this is such a weird pattern, is that in that last like 9 months that I've been, you know, my income took a big jump and has stayed there, is actually me focusing far less on it has been the thing that has really helped it jump up. You know, before that it was kind of like, what's my goal each month, and like how far away am I from it, or how close am I to it, or, you know, counting along the way and being really obsessive about it, and probably making it mean far more about me than it actually did. And you know, at one point at the end of last year, I was just kind of like, you know what, like the money that I make is the money that I make. It doesn't really bother me that much. Like I've got more than enough to survive, and I know that my wealth is building, and I know that it's going to keep on doing it because I'm in this for the long term. But like, I want to enjoy my life. I want to be present in my life. And when I'm focused on like counting every dollar, I'm not enjoying it. And I'm missing the whole point. So I just kind of like took my focus away from, you know, counting the dollars. And wouldn't you know it, that's the thing that really shot my income up. You know, like I had my first six-figure month a couple months ago when I was in Europe, and I wasn't even paying attention to it. I was just kind of like, oh, I wonder where I'm at for the month. I was like, oh shit, $100,000. Passed that a few days ago. It's like, oh, okay, there you go. So, I mean, strategically, I think that's actually a really solid strategy, is kind of like stop focusing on it so much and just actually focus on living your life and sell the things that you want to sell and that you're really excited to deliver on. So yeah, money looks very different, but it feels very different, I think now is really the key. So it was something that I think I grew up in like a middle class family. Like I never wanted for anything. Like I was very, very fortunate, very, very lucky growing up. And so, you know, money was never the thing that like we didn't have enough of, but that doesn't mean that my parents didn't pass down certain, you know, scarcity mindsets and things like that. And of course, you know, being passed on from other people in my life as well. And like early experiences in my 20s where, you know, I didn't have enough money and, you know, all that kind of stuff. So money just feels so different now. So I remember when I was in my job, I used to stay up, you know, like obsessively some nights and be like despairing over my income. Like, how am I ever going to make more money? Like, how am I ever going to do things like buy a house and pay off my student loan and go traveling and do all of these things that I want to do? How am I ever going to do that on this income? You know, saving a few $100s a week, it just felt like there was never enough. And so of course that mindset carried over into the start of my business. And then when I realized that mindset of like, there's never going to be enough was really driving a lot of my reality, that was when I started doing a lot more work on that. So I think that's probably the biggest thing that has shifted for me in terms of just feeling really supported by money and just like truly feeling the the potential of what is out there to be made if you want to. Like we're in a multi-million, probably billion-dollar industry at this point. You know, obviously there are so many industries that there are potentials to make money in. Like, we're so fortunate that we have the skills and that we're building the skills to be able to welcome in that money. And if you do the money mindset work at the same time, like, the world's your oyster. And so, yeah, it not only looks different, but it feels so different now.
Yes. And that really is the crux of it all, like how we feel with money.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, as you sort of zoom out and take a bird's eye view of the last 5 years, can you pinpoint any specific shifts or things that felt like a pivotal moment in your relationship with money, or how you felt about it, or something that you did that really accelerated the growth of your business?
The one that stands out the most to me is the one where I cracked into like my first $30,000 month. And before that, I had been probably circling around like $15,000 a month, probably about maybe like 6 months or so. I'd like solidly been around that. And this, like, I wasn't even working on, you know, having $30,000 come into my business. Like, it wasn't even in my like realm of awareness. But I had been doing so much money mindset work around, I was probably focused on like 20,000 at that point. Like, that felt like a really big jump to me. And all of a sudden, this 1 month, this one client wanted to pay me in full. And when I did the maths and when the money came in, it took me up to like 32 or something like that for the month. And I freaked out. Because I wasn't like prepared for it. And I hadn't got my head around, you know, what did that mean for me to be making that money every month? And that was where I went through a really big identity shift, almost like unpreparedly. Like, I wasn't expecting it. I didn't know how it was going to feel. I hadn't prepared myself for how it was going to feel. And I didn't have any friends who were making that kind of money. And so when I got to that point, there were all of these big questions that then like reactively came up, like, who am I now? Like, is it safe to make all of this money? Is it safe to have all of this money? Can I sustain this? Like, all of these questions that I just wasn't prepared for came up in that moment. And I remember I was actually sitting right here. I'm sitting on my bed right now because it's like 6 a.m. in the morning. It's freezing in New Zealand. But I was sitting right here on my bed and I was like, I don't know what to do with myself. And I like physically in my body, I just didn't know what to do with myself. I just had all of this like energy. So I was like, I'm going to go for a run. So I just like felt like I had to get this energy out. So I went for a run, like running through the run. And I was just like crying. All of these tears threw me down my face because I just didn't know what to do with myself.
Yeah.
I got home and I was like, who do I talk to about this? Who can I actually talk to about this experience of having all of this money land in my account? I was in between coaches. And anyway, so I called my dad. My dad has been a businessman for himself, you know, worked for himself for a number of years. And I called him and I was just like, I don't know what to do. And he kind of like talked me through it. And like, which was amazing, not only like for our relationship, for us to kind of like get our relationship to that point where we could have that conversation. But that was a really pivotal moment for me because I started, I think, seeing that it's not only important to do the mindset work around, you know, the level that you're wanting to go to, but also go beyond that.
Yeah.
And also start looking at like, well, you know, if your vision is this big, then at some point your income's probably going to match that. And it's going to catch up at some point, and it may come in before you're prepared for it.
Yeah.
And so just like, you know, kind of extrapolating out, like not really just like, this is the number I'm going for. It's kind of like, this is the range that I'm going for right now. And this is the range that I'm playing in. And like making sure that it's not just about doing the belief work, because I think that's where sometimes we can get stuck with the money mindset, is like, you know, what do you believe is possible, and unpacking some of those beliefs around scarcity and abundance and et cetera, but also doing the identity work.
Yeah.
Like, who are you going to choose to be at that level of money? And because I think at that point I hadn't really faced a lot of like the fears that I had around who I was going to be with money. I kind of thought people are going to think I'm entitled, and people are going to think I'm a brat, and people are going to think that my parents handed this to me or whatever. And so really making sure that at the crux of it, it's about the identity of who you want to take forward to that relationship with money and that experience of money. Because the truth is that you get to choose to be whoever you want to be with money, and money just amplifies who you already are anyway. So it's really just an expression of like more of the things that you value. So if you spend time getting solid in who you are and getting solid in your values at lower income levels, when you grow your income, you'll know that won't change you. And so that was quite pivotal for me to be like, actually, I get to experience who I want to be, not who I think that I'm gonna be. And I think that was probably pretty solid for me, and that meant that my income actually ended up staying pretty consistent at that point for a little while then, because I was like, actually, it's really safe to be here. I can actually handle this. But I think in hindsight, if I hadn't had that penny drop, I think I would have freaked out and sabotaged my income, because I've seen that happen a lot as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that you brought this forward, because it really is true that sometimes the things that we dream of or imagine ourselves having one day, it's like then it comes and we're really quite surprised at how unsafe it feels in our bodies.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like, well, that's the invitation to create safety and to do some nervous system regulation and to do some of the identity work. And I do agree with you. I think you can do some of it in advance. And it's like, it may feel unsafe when it lands, and stuff may come up that you weren't expecting. And it's just like, are you ready to meet yourself at that level and do the work that's been revealed?
100%. And I think that's just really it, isn't it? Like, every time you crack through to a new level, you've done it before. Like, so you know how to do it. You might not have done it at that level, but you know that you can trust yourself, that you've maintained, income levels at lower levels. And I think that was kind of what happened when I hit the 100K. It was like, oh, let me just check in about how this actually feels in my body, and like, what's coming up for me. And because I'd done that so many times before, it was actually pretty easy to regulate myself at that level. So like, I can't say enough for doing that work. Like you say, and I haven't mentioned that yet either, but the nervous system regulation is like so incredibly important, because if you don't feel safe, you're going to sabotage it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, we're not a match for receiving, 30K pay in fulls if it throws our body into a complete panic every time.
Exactly. Yeah,
like that's actually divine protection that we're not getting those every day until it starts to feel normal and starts to feel safe.
Exactly right. Yeah. So that was a really, really pivotal moment for me. I think that's the one that, when I think about my whole money journey, that's the one I think where, the biggest shifts came out all at once.
Yeah. So when you have clients that you're sort of coaching through this process, like there's another level that they're sort of striving for, what types of identity work and exercises do you like to invite them into?
Yeah, good question. It's really, it's obviously going to depend on the client and like their specific needs. But in my general work with clients anyway, there is a lot of focus on beingness, and like what their values are and what's important to them and what their standards are and who do they actually want to be in their business. And so because we've done a lot of that work, when it comes to relating that to the income goals that they have, we instantly go to identity work and nervous system regulation work around like, what are the slight differences between who you are right now and who she's going to be when she is making, let's just say, 30K a month. Because there are going to be some differences. And I like to ask clients things like, what are the decisions that you'll be making at that point in time? Like when you do have $30,000 dropping into your account every month, and that's pretty reliable, what kinds of decisions are you going to be making? Because, if one of your values is like, let's just say it is really around like security and stability and having like a home base, maybe one of your goals is to have a house, right? To buy a home. So one of the decisions that you're probably going to be starting to make when you're making consistent $30,000 months is probably going to see a mortgage broker and starting to look at buying a home and starting to get them into like doing these things now so that they can actually feel in their body what happens when they go and do it. So putting themselves into those experiences before they're ready, before they're financially ready, it gets their brain into the identity of I'm already in this place, because your brain doesn't know the difference between what is reality and what is not, right? So like I get them to go and actually like integration exercises is what I call them, like go and put yourself in that experience. And I'm a big fan of clients putting themselves physically in those experiences before they think that they're ready as well. Sometimes it means spending money that they feel scared to spend. Sometimes it doesn't. But like whether that's, so for me, like I love luxury. I love those things. So last month when I flew back from Europe, I upgraded myself to first class because I knew that that was my edge. I was like, I don't quite feel ready for that, so I'm going to do it anyway. And like just integrating into that experience, because once you get into it, you realize actually you can do it. But that doesn't work unless you're also regulating your nervous system at the same time and doing that same work, because you could put yourself in that experience and freak out and not know how to hold yourself through it. And that's actually going to have, the opposite effect from what we want. So I think it is wonderful to do, the identity work, the mindset work on paper, but it's even better to do it in reality, right? So as many of those opportunities and experiences as possible to put yourself in that place. Like, if you think that $30,000 a month, version of you has got, has thrown out all of her old underwear and is wearing like beautiful lingerie and like, she's got new swimmers and things like that, then do that now. Like there are so many little things that actually don't cost a lot of money, don't take a lot of time, but they're little like anchor points throughout your day. You're like, oh, I'm already being her now. I'm already being her now. I'm already being her now. And I think that's the most sustainable way to do that work as well, rather than just like sitting there with a pen and paper and trying to work through every single belief and wondering why it's not happening yet, which can be pretty frustrating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I completely agree. So, like the embodiment work, it's often the little things. It's not the big radical financial move that we often think it's going to be.
No.
And that's when we really meet whatever resistance is there.
Exactly.
Like when you're walking around in the new lingerie, if you're feeling like, who am I to be doing this? Oh, okay.
That's the opportunity.
Yeah. That's where we're at. That's that little energetic roadblock.
Yeah. Exactly, because we don't.
But when you put it on paper, you don't feel the resistance.
Yeah, and you've never actually been in that situation before either. So you're trying to predict what resistance is going to come up when you don't actually know what resistance is going to come up. And sometimes that can actually have a negative effect too, because you're taking on what other people have said their resistances have been, and that might not actually be your own. You might put on the underwear and be like, damn straight, I was born to be in this underwear. Like, and you might actually be fine.
Right.
And then you don't have an issue. So I think, being in the opportunity is really where the rubber hits the road. That's where the work is to be done.
Totally. So give us a little glimpse into what luxury looks like in your life.
Ooh. So actually it's like, so the brand theme that like my team have whenever they're like doing anything for me, like visually or anything, is casual luxury. So that's like, I mean, like this jumper is probably a good example of it. Like it's a really nice like designer jumper. Like I have a few of them because they're just like awesome and comfortable and amazing. But that's really what it looks like for me, is like the everyday luxuries, the really nice the nice of everything. So like go to the supermarket, if you're going to buy peppermint tea, don't buy the one that is like the budget one, buy the really, really nice one that you want, buy the thing that you want. And I think that has been another big part of my money story as well, is because one of the patterns that I had before I had money was go into a shop and just go straight to the sale rack.
Yeah.
Go online, and if you're shopping online, go, change the filter to price is the lowest to the highest. Like
yes.
look for the discount immediately, and really just like actually asking myself instead, like, what do I want? And so to me, that's what luxury feels like, is asking myself what I want and then having that. And then I guess what it looks like, it ends up being, things that are like, a little bit extra, a little bit nicer. And I drive a nice car. I live in like a decent enough house, but I don't think I'm ever going to be that person that's just like over the top with that kind of stuff. It's just kind of like, if I want it, I'll have it, but I don't feel like I need it to prove anything or anything like that. To me, it's those little moments of just like, putting a nice piece of clothing on and just feeling really good in it. That's what it feels like to me.
I love that.
Yeah.
So Carly, as we're kind of wrapping up here, I wanted to invite you to share where you hang out online so that people can connect with you.
Oh yeah. So the best place is Instagram. That's where I hang out the most, and my stories is where I am most days. I have a podcast as well called the Fulfillionaire Podcast. And yeah, pretty sporadically on there, but yeah, I do hang out there. And we have a website as well, which is www.themidasacademy.com. But Instagram's the best place. Come and hang out with me on Instagram. I'm at the Midas Academy.
At the Midas Academy. Amazing. Mm-hmm. And Carly, for everyone listening that is maybe working on, embodying that next level of wealth for themselves, like any last words of wisdom?
Tap into why you want it. Tap into why it's important for you and for your clients and for the greater good. This is like the rule of 3. I call it the me, we, and 3 rule. Is like, if you don't have a good reason for wanting it, if you don't understand why it's actually important to you, you're going to have a really hard time to create it, and you're going to have a really hard time to experience it. So instead of mindlessly chasing a money goal, actually tap into what you want and why you want it. And that goes both ways. Your goal might actually be smaller than what you think that it is, or it might actually be bigger too. And it might be about giving yourself permission to think even bigger. No matter what, you can create it. Like, we know that that's possible. Anything is possible for anybody. But tap into what you want and why you want it, and it will be so much sweeter when it finally comes in.
Amazing. Okay. So take the homework from Carly, check out the rule of 3 as you journal it out. Tag Carly at the Midas Academy, tag me at mmakesmoney, and share your big vision with us. Carly, thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you to everyone listening, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in to today's show. Before you go, I have something fun to share. Now, when you leave a review of the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube, take a quick screenshot and send it to hi@emilywilcox.com. You'll be entered into a drawing to win a free one-on-one Voxer coaching day with me, and you help the show reach more new listeners. Such a win-win. I also invite you to follow me on Instagram at mmakesmoney, and to jump into my free Telegram community, The Money Club, which is linked in the show notes. Until next time, I'm sending you all the magic money vibes.